I graduated from my undergraduate degree in viola performance in 2011 and went to start a master's of music at the Cleveland Institute of Music in viola performance as well. It was my dream school. I was very excited to be there. So basically, initially, my pinky and my ring finger on my left hand would tingle and go completely numb. Eventually, was how bad it got. I had a moment where I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna say goodbye to that life. Even though I got the green light, even though I could go and try, I want to maybe pursue this new thing that I've found that I actually really like, and I actually want to explore becoming, good at this, which was teaching in the classroom. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice is it's the health first and making sure that, who you're seeking and things is informing decisions that you're making.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the show. I'm really excited to share what we have to share with you today. I was telling our guest today before we started recording that she's actually our first string musician who's been on the show, and I'm really excited to get her perspective on things because I am definitely not a string musician, but I think that the world of string music has so much to offer, and as well to our friends who are out there who are dealing with injury. And so I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. She is a middle school orchestra teacher in Sparks, Nevada, and has done a lot of research on body mapping for violists and among other things. And so let's just get right to it. Dr. Noelle Rader, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thanks, Clark, for having me. I'm just really excited to like what you're doing with the podcast, and kind of said, I've listened to at least what's come out so far when we're recording, and it's just amazing to hear so many different stories, but then also, the positivity and joy that can come even, either in the midst of an injury or, life after, either in recovery or whenever you find out. So.
Absolutely. It's just, it's a journey, and that's always been my goal with this show, is just to create a community around it so we can all be supporting each other.
For sure.
So, I mean, you kind of know how I roll with these episodes. I just love to hear right off the bat kind of what your experience has been with injury, and just want to hear your story, and we'll kind of go from there.
For sure. Yeah. Mine is kind of quite over a decade now of recovery, and kind of over a decade from my initial injury as well. So I graduated from my undergraduate degree in viola performance in 2011 and went to start a master's of music at the Cleveland Institute of Music in viola performance as well. It was my dream school. I was very excited to be there. I'd basically spent my whole undergrad kind of having a goal of ending up back east somewhere at a couple different conservatories. And before I graduated with my undergrad, though, I started to have basically my injury was diagnosed eventually as an ulnar nerve entrapment. So basically, initially, my pinky and my ring finger on my left hand would tingle and go completely numb. Eventually, was how bad it got. And so I'd kind of off and on been dealing with that for a couple years. It'd come and go before I graduated with my undergrad. And then when I was at CIM, it actually wasn't really that bad. I kind of remember it being like a good phase of things, of symptoms when I was first there. And but then my second semester there, I was prepping for a professional audition. I was playing in the opera pit, all the things that everyone says, it's just kind of a perfect storm of different things. And so what was interesting is a lot of people I've talked to about their injuries, and even people on your podcast so far, was it, it was pain, like yours, for example, Clark, was like pain. Mine was never pain. And so that's what was weird about mine, was like, it just was like, I just couldn't feel my fingers. Anyways, so I had gotten into Chautauqua on a fellowship that summer and was looking forward to that. But then there was this moment kind of when the semester ended and I had about a month before I was kind of going to head to my summer festival that year. I just kind of had a moment where I was like, I can't go. I can't do this anymore. Like I have to spend the summer figuring out what's going on, essentially. So I went back home for me, and then I still live here because I kind of moved back and never left again. But as Reno, Nevada, and I did acupuncture. I did this. I went to yoga. I was kind of doing everything that you hear you're supposed to do or can experiment with that's helped other people. And I finally got in with kind of like he just happens to be in Reno, but he's like a world-class arms and shoulder guy. He's a surgeon. And I finally got in with him, and he was like, oh, you have a nerve entrapment. We just have to find where it is, and then we can see how bad it is. And so I had to, I think it's EMG, where basically there's they put nodes in where the nerve they're testing, and they kind of send shocks down it to kind of see how
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Have you heard of that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I remember, so this is, summer of 2012 at this point. And I went in for that, and come to find out the pinch was in my elbow. And basically how bad my EMG came back was your nerve. He basically was like, I need to go in and have surgery on your elbow because the results are so bad that you're going to lose function of your hand if you don't have surgery. Like it was like literally the worst news, right? Like the worst news you can possibly have. And this is my left hand. So it's like my viola hand, et cetera. And right. So basically getting that news was then, so not only did I not go to Chautauqua this summer, I can't go back to school. Like it was basically like I had to put in for a leave of absence for my scholarship and things, and just to keep my standing at the school, and it was horrible. I look back now and I'm kind of, how did I do it? Because it was just one of those things of like, it literally was like everything I worked for, I was living the dream. And then it just kind of came crashing down, even though I'd been dealing with it longer than that time at CIM. It just, it was just such a tragedy, it felt like. And so that fall I had the surgery, and technically I got a clean bill of health. I was going to occupational therapy as part of just recovery from the surgery, and I went for like 4 months. It was twice a week for like 4 months. I loved my OT. He was like so patient with me. There was some tears for sure, because there was just like, he had me do just like simple little exercises like reaching for things and having to use my fingers a certain way. And it was so hard. It felt so hard. Like I was like, I'm literally telling my body to do this and it's not doing it, right? And I'm sure other people can relate as far as, even a music way. But for me, it was just like picking up this peg from this board, and I couldn't even, do it. And there was a point where my surgeon and my OT were like, okay, technically you have the green light. Technically you're cured, but you're not going to lose function of your hand. Your nerve's not going to die anymore, because basically they went in and kind of just worked the attachment of my nerve in my elbow in a certain way, so it just would no longer get pinched in that certain way. And so they were like, okay, technically you have the green light. Technically you could play again. Technically this. We just don't know if you'll ever be able to do the hours again, like the hours you were doing before. So technically you can play again, but, we just don't know what your future really holds. And that's like for you to explore kind of thing. Like we've fixed you, quote unquote, but like, we just don't know what that is going to look like for like that career you'd chosen. And I remember asking my surgeon pretty early on, I was like, is there any way I could have prevented this? Because violas, we have some things that are, our instruments aren't standardized like violins and cellos, for example. So we can have anywhere from like a 15-inch length viola professionally, or like a 17-inch length viola. It just kind of depends on what you can handle or the sound you like of certain sized instruments and things. So I was like, do I get a smaller instrument? Can I fix it that way? Can I this and that? And he was like, honestly, like some of it's your biology, like
Oh, that's
you probably
comforting.
would have, right? No, that was like literally like some of the worst news too, was like, he was like, you probably would have had this problem at 80, but you're like, have lived the life you've lived and you're like 23. So like you get to deal with this right now. And you might have been prone to this even to in from the get-go. And, now that I have the knowledge that I have now with kind of some of the injury prevention stuff, which, I hope to share during this interview, there was
Absolutely.
other things going on, like there were other things going on now looking back. But, so basically I had this moment in the time that I was recovering from this injury. I'd gotten my substitute license in the schools for my district where I live, and actually started like subbing it gave me the flexibility to like go to doctor's appointments, go to the OT, but still like kind of have some money. And I wasn't necessarily like, check out at, a retail store or whatever. Not that there's anything bad with that, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And in that time when I was recovering from the injury, I actually fell in love with classroom teaching. It was kind of interesting because I found that I really liked working with students and children. And, I was subbing for math classes and English classes, but when I was with the music students, because I'm desperate for music subs now. I can't imagine how excited people were when I was a sub and I could actually run a rehearsal and things. And I found very quickly that I really loved the classroom and I loved teaching. And so I kind of had this moment where I could have gone back and tried to finish my master's at CIM. Like technically I had that green light, but I just wasn't really, you're never guaranteed a performance life or career, right? Not that I had guarantees there, but I was less guaranteed now, like there's less of it happening now. And I had a moment where I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to say goodbye to that life. Even though I got the green light, even though I could go and try, I want to maybe pursue this new thing that I've found that I actually really like. And I actually want to explore becoming, good at this, which was teaching in the classroom. And, I always had plans of probably having a studio as a performer. But now my teaching looks different. My program, I have 230 students this year between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I've been at this school was my first job, and I've stayed here the 10 years. And I've built it from the ground up. It was kind of struggling when I first came in with the person who was there having some health problems. And so I came in after they decided to retire, and then, I've built it up. And, 200 students is pretty standard for me every year. And so even though, if you told me, when I had that injury and then had made that decision by 2013 to become a teacher, like, oh, you're going to be obsessed with being able to teach, the bow hand to 6th graders, and you're going to want to be really good at it. And it's going to be this new thing. I would have just laughed, because I wanted to be really good at playing the whatever excerpt for this and trying out and doing the auditions and that kind of thing. But then now I'm like, really obsessed with making sure my retention rate stays over 80%. Like what am I doing each year to make sure students feel welcomed here and that orchestra is something they want to do. So that's basically the basics. I got the injury, which put me then on this path of what I do every day now. But the decision to not go back to the performance was a really big deal. I remember it being really hard to be like, after that leave of absence was up for that year that I'd put in for to keep my standing at the school, I had to say whether I was going back or not. And I just remember that being almost the hardest part, was saying, I think I'm saying goodbye to this forever. When for many months, about a year, it had been, oh, I'm coming back after this year. And so that part is always, I look back and I have a lot of gratitude and kindness for that part of myself and that version of myself all those years ago that, it was a hard decision to make, but I think I also had the foresight to realize, I can make a lot doing this other thing as well that I'm actually really like, and I think I can make something awesome out of it, which I think I have.
Man, thanks for sharing, going that deep into it, because now you've given me all this stuff that we can talk about, which I'm really excited for.
Good.
First thing I want to just point out that I think is just such a beautiful part of your story, to everyone who's listening out there. By the time that this episode comes out, another solo episode will have come out where I talk about fulfillment.
Yes.
I think that should be coming out in a couple of weeks from now. But it's just, I listen to a lot of like personal development things and read all these books and things like that. And one of the things that they always point out is that what we want in life is not necessarily the things that we like, the material things or the things or the relationships that we want, how they make us feel, right? Because what we're all seeking in life is fulfillment, right? Or joy or happiness, however you want to swing it, right? And I think sometimes as musicians or whatever, we're passionate about something, and then that thing gets kind of, when we have to deviate from that for a little bit, we're worried that that's the only source of our joy, right? Or our fulfillment. And that's not the case, right? I think
absolutely
one of the greatest gifts that I've been given with my injury, and I'm sure you'd agree, is just learning how to find fulfillment in other things when that big source of fulfillment is gone for a season. And so kind of like, let's go into that for a little bit. I kind of want you to go a little deeper into that that decision when you started feeling like, I'm really enjoying this classroom vibe, and but also like what other things were going to that decision, because
for sure, like kind of like pinpointing in that kind of period of it, for
Absolutely.
sure. Some of it was I kind of knew there were things on the horizon that if I had left those things that were maybe in this horizon of this new path wouldn't be there if I left. So some of the decision was, some of it was this job, because I knew pretty sure that this job was probably going to open up, and who was to say that this particular job would be available another year from then if I had gone back to the conservatory to finish the degree, the fancy degree, as I say.
Sure.
And so some of it was like, for at least in my case, a little logical, so some of it was like the logic of like giving up what was very tangible at the time of like, oh, we're pretty sure it wasn't 100%, but it was very close. We're pretty sure this person's going to retire, so this job's going to open up. And the particular community that I serve at my school has changed a lot actually over the 10 years. But at the time, this was like a really like kind of like, it would be a super great kind of first job kind of situation that I could go anywhere from. And so it was to give up this very tangible thing on this new path that I wasn't 100% sure about yet, for technically a green light from my surgeon and my OT that you can go play. We're telling you can go play. And I even tried to play a little bit at the time, I remember, and would kind of pick up my instrument. Of course, I had to be careful about it. But it was like, I knew what it took to be at CIM, and I knew what it took to, have the skills and work on the skills for that path of life, which I'd been on for many, many years. And I think there was a little bit of, it's so hard to say no to this tangible thing that's, scary and unknown, but the unknowns of this going back to the conservatory, one of those potentials was re-injuring myself, which I absolutely didn't want,
Absolutely.
and so So I think for me, I look back and there's a little bit of logic to it for me, but there might be people that it's not totally as logical as it was for me. So some of it is, choosing the unknown and maybe not being scared to like having to, rework whichever unknown you chose and then realizing more along the path. Because there was a point that's like, maybe if teaching doesn't work out, maybe I become an x-ray tech or something. Like I just kind of thought like, what's like not the most non-music thing I could start doing, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the joke at the time. I was like, maybe I'm just like leaving this entirely, right? Luckily that didn't happen. I am so glad to have what I have now, and it's still musical and it's still but the unknown part is hard, and I think in my case one of them felt a little less unknown, and a lot of me for coming to the classroom and why I even stay now, because education in America is going through a bit of a crisis. I'd say it's a bit of a trial, if you read the news for just like 1 second. And even some of why I stay, and ultimately even why I chose it all those years ago, was for the students. I absolutely love being with the students I get to teach every day. And sometimes I find like if I'm feeling kind of grouchy, it's probably because I haven't been with my students enough. So sometimes
cool.
over like summer break, I can find myself, I'm prepping for school and I'm maybe feeling grouchy about going back. And it's like, I found over the years, 10 years in, it's like, oh, I'll see them on the first day and I'll feel a lot better. And it's true. Like I'll see them on the first day after a break, spring break, winter break, whatever. And I feel 100% better seeing them. And so at the time I remember I didn't feel like I could say no to my future students either. I really felt like I could make a difference, being able to reach many hundreds of students over potentially a long career. Then, me, there's nothing wrong sitting in a practice room for 4 hours, whatever. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just remember not being able to say no to the students. And so that was some of it at the time as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love teaching. That's my passion too.
Right.
So,
no, me too. I'm like such a nerd about it now.
Yeah. No, seriously. One of the things that's actually kept me, I've probably talked about this before with some other guests, but one of the things that kept me in the game, as far as in the music game, was the potential that I have now because of this injury to help students, right? To help them have a different perspective on their musicianship and obviously a more healthy perspective on their musicianship.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I wanted to go next was, two things I want to talk about with your students. What your process, first of all, like what was your process in kind of, delving deep into kind of the pedagogy of healthy playing, right?
Yes.
But then also part two of that question is just out of my own curiosity, how do I phrase this? How you have learned to kind of, because teaching a physical instrument is so individual, right? But doing it in a public setting, in a public school setting, like how have you navigated that?
Where I have
think
like
there's
50 sixth graders
exactly.
in the same classes.
And I think with your perspective, having gone through an injury as a public music educator is going to be so valuable to people listening out there. So if you want to just kind of, take that for where you want.
No, and this is kind of, I was hoping you'd ask some questions like this because this just gets me into like nerd. I'm like so into it these days. And
this is the place where we can nerd out.
Yes, exactly. Some of this is like, it actually follows the progression of my career, I'd say.
Oh, cool.
My master's ended up being how I got my there was a local college here that had a really great program where because I already had an undergraduate degree, all I had to do was some like education courses to get my teaching license for my state. And then after that, I did a project that then was like a master's equivalency. And then I was able to graduate with a master's with that. So that was a really cool experience that I was able to do that so quickly all those years ago to be able to be highly qualified in my state. And then, but then some of it is those first few years, I was just trying to figure out how to be a teacher. How do I keep kids in their seats? That kind of stuff. And that's like a whole nother podcast episode. I'm sure if on some, teacher podcast I could have someday. But something that bothered me though is because of my injury, I was noticing that I didn't talk about that stuff. That, like I found myself frustrated that education, classroom education at least, wasn't having the conversations that coming from professional track is having as far as like injuries and injury prevention and body awareness and that kind of stuff. And so after a few years of teaching, and this was a few years ago now because I'm done with the degree, thankfully, I started a doctorate at Boston University online. And that they have a great program there. They have a master's. It's great program. I was able to stay in the classroom. That's why it took me 6 years to finish it. But I was able to stay in the classroom and better myself at the same time and work on this advanced degree. And so I went into that degree already thinking I wanted my research to be like injury prevention in the classroom because it wasn't happening. It's not happening, essentially. And I couldn't find anything that was talking about it. I was having a hard time because I would ask questions or I'd be doing research and it would be like, how do we do injury prevention with kids in the classroom, and no one could answer me. And then people would be like, have you tried yoga? And it's like, Mike, I can't even get them, I have like 45 minutes with them. Like we're not putting our instruments down to like, do yoga poses, which is like fine. Nothing against you. I'm actually a pretty practiced yoga person myself now, but it just bothered me that no one could answer how to do it with the pedagogy. It just drove me crazy. Like there wasn't any answer that, you can integrate it this way, right? It was like, well, pedagogy is this way and just make sure they have good posture. Well, I had good posture and I totally messed up my arm. Like there's a lot of people. And I had great pedagogues. I had wonderful pedagogues that set me up for success. Like I had a lot going for me and I still hurt myself, right? And there felt like there was something missing for myself in my own journey. There felt like there was something missing every day with my students, and the research didn't have the answers for me. And so I went through my coursework at BU and got to my dissertation phase and still didn't really quite know how I was what I could do to research injury prevention in the classroom, even though that's exactly what I wanted to do because it's entirely missing. No one talked to me about injury prevention or body awareness till I was in college. And all the research says that's too late. All the research is done with college students. And all of them say, I've actually been hurting for a while before I got here. and a lot of the research, the results say, like, doing it in college is too late because you already have habits ingrained, and so, like, you're nodding your head because it's just like, you and I, like, it's literally everyone's story almost. And
it's so true.
So it's right. Exactly. And so I'm getting really excited. You can tell on my voice. Thank you for, sticking with me here. But I got with someone who was highly the person in the research as my dissertation advisor. I was so lucky. Her name is Judy Palick. She's done all the research on like string pedagogy, injury prevention, body awareness. And I got with her finally, and she's based in Michigan. I'm in Nevada. Technology is awesome, right? Like I was able to have an advisor who's, the authority in my field. And I finally got with her and I was just like, how are we going to do this? How can we get injury prevention with pedagogy, and how can I do it in my classroom so it doesn't feel extra? Because I think that's some of the problem is it's like,
right. It's
the extra part of it. And it's the integration that we need, right? And she has been highly involved with body mapping. And body mapping is a branch of Alexander technique, for those who don't know. And basically, Feldenkrais, Alexander technique, body mapping, they're all under the umbrella of something called somatic education, which basically is we use the body to learn about the body. Pretty smart, right? But what's cool about body mapping is it's designed for musicians. Like it's Barbara Conable, she wasn't a musician herself, but she found that musicians aren't aware of their body in some many fashions. And she created basically a curriculum for anatomy and body awareness curriculum to help musicians learn how to use their body better. And there's some processes there. And so what I found is I was like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. So I got super deep in body mapping pretty quickly. I used body mapping curriculum integrated with my 6th grade curriculum, just right there. So basically my dissertation was researching integrating body mapping with beginning students. So they're touching the instrument first time and I'm talking, it's really cool, right? And I'm not the first and only. There's someone who my advisor was also working with who was kind of doing it in a different way, but we were doing it very similarly at the same time. So there's more out there now. But when my dissertation, when I was working on it, I just had wished my dissertation existed when I was doing my research. So now it's out there. It's published. I have a copy here just kind of sitting next to me that I brought just to kind of, if I needed to reference it today when we were talking, if it came up. But the results were cool. It basically was, there wasn't going to be, life-changing things from my 12-week intervention that I did with body mapping integrated with the pedagogy. But some of the cool things, I did a quantitative study, so I had some statistics. And one of the clearest things was that the students could learn the body mapping curriculum. It was like night and day. The students who got it learned that information, which we didn't know that before. We didn't know if young students could learn this information. Were they necessarily in less pain and discomfort than the other group that didn't get it? No, but that's hard to tell when the first day of the study is you're touching your instrument for the first time versus playing the twinkle variations by the end of it. There's
Sure.
There's not a big increase of playing time there. But I used a body awareness survey, and one of the results from that is the students who got the body mapping curriculum maintained their body awareness across. The students who did not get body mapping lost body awareness over the 12 weeks. And so I just think that's very interesting, and we need to think about in educate, not even just classroom, just everywhere. Is there something about traditional pedagogy that causes disembodiment? Is there something about how music is taught currently that maybe we lose a sense of our body awareness because of maybe focusing on other things? And you're smiling because maybe that's
almost
was
giddy
your
right
experience.
Now. I like you're speaking my language right now.
Yes. Well, and you other people you've talked to and what I've listened to on the released episodes so far, like you other people have talked about this. You've brought it up, and so one of body mapping, the organization, the Association for Body Mapping Education, ABME, one of their missions, and now I'm super into this too, is we need to fundamentally change the foundation of music education. It can't just be there's music, we're teaching music, and then the body stuff. It is the body stuff, and so I use body mapping. It's not the only thing that can be integrated. I think what I love about body mapping and what more and more shows is that it's integratable and it is for musicians, and so there's things that maybe music making, there's things missing from that are injuring musicians. And so, how can we fix that by having anatomy and awareness education as part of what we do? So, So there's that. That was very long to answer to your question. I don't even know if I got everything.
I'm so excited to dig into that. No, you did. I'm so excited to dig into that in a second. But
yeah.
Oh, wow. I just, like I said, it's when I realized that a lot of the things, I mean, and I say this with all the love and respect for my
Exactly. Me
primary
too,
teachers,
right?
but
Yes.
but when I realized that my injury, which was an overuse injury, had been caused from techniques that I had learned incorrectly in
Yes.
the first year, maybe 2 years or a couple of weeks, even, who knows, of playing the trumpet. I started, like, it's what kept me as a trumpet player, kept me in the game and pursuing recovery rather than pursuing a different path, because
Yes.
it was so revolutionary for me from a life standpoint that I just wanted to learn as much as I could about it, eat it up, so I could not only become a better musician myself, but also help others as well. And that kind of leads me to, I guess, that part too of how do you then navigate the public aspect of it, where you do have all those students, and it is a very individual, physiologically unique thing for each student. I guess
But
the
then it's
principles
this
are all
group
the same,
setting.
but it's the group setting, and that's one of the things that I've had a personal. I don't know if I would call it an issue, but just concerns with, if I were to be
Yeah.
in either situation. And so I know there's some teachers out there who will probably definitely have that same question, who are listening right now. So
Yeah. Well, and I guess if just to try and answer it right now is so much of it has to do with the language we use. And I think this has come up on some of the other episodes of your podcast that I
yep,
listened to. And is the language we use actually anatomically correct? Is it stating a truth, or is it just like an idea? And not that there's no room for analogy in body mapping talks about you need to have a musical intention all the time as far as like awareness and things. But I just remember when I was first getting into body mapping, there would be things that I was learning that I was like, why did no one tell me, like just about my body, that I just found revolutionary. And
yeah,
one of the biggest ones, just to do just right here, just because we have the camera on, and I know this podcast, but you also put out videos. If you like look at your thumb and you kind of look at, do a thumbs up, and you're looking at it, you're visually, you see two joints, right? You see this joint right here where,
sure,
kind of starts from the hand, and then you have this other one, right? But you actually have a three jointed thumb. Your thumb starts all the way down, actually at your wrist joint. It starts all the way down here. There's something called a saddle joint there. And that's what makes our thumbs truly opposable. That's a word I knew. I knew about opposable thumbs. That's nothing new to me. But and why it's called body mapping is because we want to update the neurological representation of our body that lives in our brain. We want to have an accurate map of our body in our head. And so if you don't know you have a three-jointed thumb, are you going to move your thumb in a way that is anatomically correct? No, fundamentally, you're not. You're going to try and move it from here and maybe strain the muscles and tendons in your hand in a way because you don't actually know that it actually starts down here at the wrist, right? And so it's that kind of stuff that can get integrated so easily. Like I can have a 50-person beginner class and I'm teaching, I don't call it a bow hold anymore. I call it a bow hand, right? So I changed my language there. I would say, hey, we're going to learn our bow hand today. And hey, can we look at this image really quick? I may have a joke. It's Halloween every day in Dr. Rader's class because I have bone models, I have images we can look at. And
nice.
You'd be surprised how much even my students are like, yes, like I love bones. Yes. There's a couple kids who get freaked out, but eventually they're like, oh yeah, this is cool, right? And, we look at an image of where our thumb starts and I have them feel it. And I'm like, hey, so you know how we have to have like a bent thumb for our bow hand? Like, remember that it starts down here. And that's just from day one. Like it's just the awareness that they have a three-jointed thumb. It's the language I'm using to say it's coming from here. And then I don't call it a bow hold because what does hold say, about that, we don't hold things, we shouldn't, at least to avoid injury as best we can. So that's just an easy one to just say right now. Like it's like the language you use, and it's also like, what is the truth? Like the truth is the anatomy, and how we can bring that into our awareness to move the truth to the truth of our bodies, not necessarily what is maybe an analogy of what is or isn't there. If that answers the question at all.
Yeah. And I think just to point out, like, I've got a couple of professors here. I just recently transitioned out of the music education program for reasons we won't get into, but they very into like extended techniques, I guess would be the right way to put it, of like one of my professors who made most of his career out of being a string or orchestral middle school teacher, Dr. Sam Sagawa. He always had us using 8 cartons and a dowel rod. So like using those types of things, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not talking about that. It's just in a negative, or that they are not helpful, but it's just how we perceive how our body interacts with those other objects, right?
Yes, no, and it's not necessarily like, as someone who is a string educator and I actually have a set of dowels and 8 curtains in my classroom, it's not that those things are bad. It's just like, it doesn't matter if we're not talking about the anatomical truth around it, right? How that is, you're trying to teach them the motion away from the instrument. Lovely. That's actually how movement and motor patterns work. You have to like learn it to then apply it, right? So that's just awesome, right? But it's like, oh, hey, this is a bow hold, and you have to bend your thumb, and you have to put your pinky this certain way, and blah blah blah. Like, that doesn't matter if a child or a musician's representation of themselves isn't accurate. So I have colleagues who sometimes say, I don't know how a student can hold their instrument this way. Like, how do they do that? And honestly, it's because their map has it that way. Their map is trying to hold the instrument in a way that doesn't make sense to us, but there's something missing in their idea of their body, or how it should be approaching their body, the instruments, etc., that maybe they think that's how they can hold it, or how they should hold it, or whatever.
Or how they've seen other people hold it.
Yes, or that's their impression of how to hold it. They watch, see, this is the thing that Barbara Conable said, the founder and creator really of body mapping, said. She's like, too often we leave our sensory education, we leave it up to chance. So, these students that I have really now, Gen Alpha, they're calling them, they've grown up on YouTube. They're watching YouTube. They're watching music on YouTube, right? So visually they're seeing things, and maybe this is their interpretation of visually what they see. When really, we're leaving up to chance that then they're going to, at least their sensory and anatomical way they approach the instrument, we leave that way too much, like we're not addressing it. And so like, if we can start addressing it, is it going to solve, like, do my students have the best posture ever? Does my program have like no problems for, no, like I still have, I call them like my slugs, they're sitting there, they're slugs in their chairs. Like, even though they do have, I've taught them about their spine, and I've taught them about the curves of their spine and their pelvis and, all this stuff. Like, we talk about that stuff. Are they perfect? No, but at least I'm trying to educate them about the anatomical truth and the sensory, what we need to bring into our awareness to be able to play, at least hopefully in a healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it starts, I'm so glad you said that it starts at that young, because
yes,
I didn't even think, like, injury was kind of, it's kind of a thing that you only really talk about when it happens to someone else, right? At least at the collegiate level.
And so much of the taboo, I think, comes from the assumption, which this has been, totally debunked in the research, but the assumption that it's like your fault or it's bad pedagogy or something, right? There's a ton of things that, yes, can be traced to bad pedagogy. And especially in the string world, there's things about like the type of chin rest and shoulder rest you use, or how tall your end pin is or isn't, like for cellos and basses, like there are legit things that are like a source of potential pain and discomfort if you're doing it incorrectly, right? So I'm not saying like none of that stuff matters. Like it does. Like I think of clarinets having like a neck strap so it's not totally all the weight on one thumb and, things like that. But those things super matter. But when those things are solved, we still have injured musicians. Like, we have more technology, more information than we've ever had as far as like how to play in a healthy way, what to do to play in a healthy way, make sure you stretch every 50 minutes, those kinds of things. And we're still hurting ourselves. We're still, students are hurting. And some of it is something's missing. And at least body mapping's answer is, being able to train our senses and having a correct and accurate understanding of our anatomy to be able to I think of myself, I had beautiful setup. I had excellent pedagogues. I had wonderful, and I still got this injury, right? And not that I was like perfect or whatever, but like I still had problems. And so, the research says it's the taboo comes from it's my fault because I have bad technique or I had bad teachers or something, right? And I know I was in school and judged people who had things going on before my own caused my own thing. And it's not the truth, It's not the truth. It's not bad pedagogy. It's not your fault, and so I think the taboo comes from that assumption, and it's not that really at all. Once you have all that stuff figured out.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just because I'm curious, I haven't heard anybody put it that way. In your eyes and the research that you've done, what if we were to put the cause, if you will, to something to label it? I mean, I don't know. It's probably not even helpful to do that, honestly. But if we were,
in some ways, I don't think it's helpful. Like, and honestly, my favorite, I actually have my dissertation right here because I'm a nerd. I was thinking because I knew I'd be coming on today, so I was like, I need to read this definition on the mic for everyone because I think there was at least what I've listened to of your podcast so far. One person was talking about their injury, and they didn't have pain, kind of like me, and you were surprised that then was an injury, right?
Yeah.
And because yours was pain, and a lot of people have pain and discomfort. That's, I'd say, the majority. But really, the go-to definition for like a overuse injury and things like that now is something called a plane-related musculoskeletal disorder. So that's a PRMD. There are injuries like focal dystonia that are not musculoskeletal. They're a neurological, but that's like a very small percentage. So I would say majority of people, this is what they're going to fall under, this category. And there's a Zaza et al., 1998, who did a huge groundwork study that found this definition. And I love this definition because it can be applied to my sixth graders. It can be applied to you at an undergrad. It could be applied to Principal Bassoon of the New York Phil. Like this definition is beautiful because a PRMD is defined as pain, weakness, lack of control, numbness, tingling, or other symptoms that interfere with one's ability to play their instrument at the level they are accustomed to. So that's what's lovely about that definition is my sixth graders, like Is their pain and discomfort playing the twinkle variations like the same as someone in the New York Phil? Absolutely not. They're playing for like 30 minutes in my class. Like, but there can be a discomfort there at the
Sure.
level they're accustomed to, right? And so that's what's just so interesting is it's if we can kind of change our mindset about that, it would be almost everyone has had an injury. When have you just had discomfort after a long rehearsal, or when have you
Sure.
had a practice session that your back kind of hurts? It's not necessarily that that's going to get in the way of you playing, but maybe your focus is on it a little bit more than you would want. So that's getting in the way of you maybe playing at the level you want to, right? So I just wanted to share that definition if that helps anyone kind of understand their own journey or how to talk to someone else about it. I think that really helps kind of put the true definition, at least a very good and well cited definition
Sure.
of what a PRMD or injury can be.
That's cool. I learned something new that just there. You're gonna have to send me. Is your dissertation also online, or is it only in print?
Oh, yeah. It's published on ProQuest. So usually you have to have access to some sort of library database to be able to get it for free. But I think my Boston has an open access link. So I could definitely send that to you to put in the show
Please
notes
do.
if needed. But basically my so it's, my name under my name, but then it's a body mapping informed pedagogy in the beginning string classroom, a quantitative investigation. So that's the title if anyone just wants to look it up without needing the link. So
Cool. Well, we're not done yet. I was just curious.
Okay.
I was really interested in that definition you got. And I want to make sure that
because
people
that's
have
like
access
the
to
kind
it.
of the point of your podcast and launching your
Absolutely.
podcast is like is kind of getting the information out there, talking to people about how and what and after an injury, and even though my research isn't necessarily like solving an injury, so much can be done if we can prevent, right? And what my journey is my journey. I don't regret any part of my life and where I'm at sitting down with you right now, but it's what about my life could have or would have been different if someone had talked to me about any of this stuff sooner, right? And so that's the part that was my research question. Like, can we do this from the get-go?
Right.
And we can't.
Well, and that's where I wanted to take it next was especially I think for wind musicians, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like wind musicians, especially in the beginning stages, our educators are very focused on just having them get a sound, right? And as long as they can get a sound, I mean, we're good. And I've noticed, and this is all, like I said, with good intentions and everything.
Of course,
but
yeah.
That's the primary focus, but then also that they aren't necessarily, well, I guess the rhetoric that I've heard is that we're just trying to get them to get a sound, and then they're not doing enough playing right now to hurt themselves. So it's still part of that, I guess, old philosophy that injury is only really an issue once you get to college or professional musicianship or whatever. And so I guess not necessarily, like, I'm not trying to out anybody or condemn anybody, but what I would just like to get your opinion on is what would be your advice to those educators who are, I mean, because the nature of the beast of being a public music educator is that you're going to probably teach an instrument that's not your primary instrument, right?
Oh, 100%. I'm really lucky that I'm in a string classroom 100% of the time, but that is not the case the majority of the time.
Right. And so what would your advice for those educators who are just, trying to build their program, trying to, build these musicians in such a beautiful way, but that may have that mindset of like, as long as they're getting a sound, we're fine. Later on down the road, if they have problems, they'll figure those out as they go along, type of thing. Does that
Yeah,
make
no,
sense?
well, fantastic. No, that's a really good question. I guess I would start with like, oh, they're not doing too much to like really hurt themselves right now. Well, that's not what the research says. Basically, any research that is asking young musicians about any kind of PRMD symptoms, so like, are you in pain or do you have discomfort right now? The answer is yeah. Like there are students who are hurting in like secondary classrooms. And if that's where, you're starting a beginner in sixth grade, like I do, that's it. They don't feel good. And it's not, and some of it is, I've heard also, you might have heard this too. Well, it's new. They're getting used to it. Like they have to just
Right.
get used to
Yeah,
it,
I've heard of that.
kind of thing. And it's like, I think there's something like if you're not moving well, you're not going to feel good, and that's the mindset change is music is movement. There's no music without movement. And I look back at myself when I was in school and you might find this self with yourself, Clark, like, do you find you're like, oh, if I could just get around my body, I'd play so much better. Like, have
Oh,
you
yeah.
ever like
Oh, yeah.
experienced, like thought
Yeah,
that?
you're
Like, I
your
would be
worst
like,
enemy to your musical expression sometimes.
yeah, like, like this dumb body. Like
Yeah.
if I could just get rid of this, like if my body would just get out of the way, I'd play so much better. And what's funny is there's no music without our bodies. Like our bodies are the music. Like even breathing. We're talking about maybe band educators right now.
Sure.
Air, we like our ribs have movement, and some people are like, yeah, duh, like, I see them moving, but like like air coming in and out of our thoracic cavity is the air is moving. We're bringing it in, we're moving it out. Right, there's the air's moving, right? And the music's not happening if the movement's not there. Like the movement of the air is the music, right? Singing, band, woodwind, brass, and so some of me, I do this with my students at the beginning of the year because some of them are like, why are we talking? This is science class. Well, this isn't science class, right? And some of me does a demonstration at the beginning of the year, like some of the first days of school. Like I'm still assigning instruments. Teachers have a lot going on, right? And what I don't
Absolutely.
want an educator to feel after listening to me talk about this is like, oh, great, one more thing, right?
Right.
But a
Right.
lot of times I play the twinkle for them, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do first time I'm gonna play for you, and then the second time I'm gonna play for you again, and you're gonna tell me what's missing, right? So I play like maybe a phrase of twinkle, and I'm like, okay, that was the first time. Here's the second time. Tell me what's missing. And I literally just stand there. And they kind of are like, what?
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, let me do it again. And I play the phrase again. And I'm like, okay, here's the second time. What's missing? And eventually by that point, there's a kid who's like, you're not moving. And I'm like, well, yeah. So I'm not moving. What's missing if we're not moving? Well, there's no music. There's no, and so some of it is if we can change that music is movement, some of what a music teacher has to do is to teach movement principles, teach about the body, teach about anatomical truths. And what do our bodies have? We have senses, and we need to, it's not just what it sounds like. Is it how it feels? Am I training how it feels with like even just my touch? We have a movement sense in our body. We have a sixth sense, and it is called kinesthesia, and it's an umbrella term for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But our bodies have a movement sense. Like if you put your hand behind your head without touching the back of your head, you're not looking at it, you're not touching it. Spread out your fingers, right? Move your fingers. And you sense them feeling. That is our senses in our body that sense our movement. And if you kept your hand back there and I told you, okay, your ring finger grows 3 inches, you can imagine what that would feel like, right? Isn't that interesting?
That's so cool.
We have we have a whole sense that I don't think we're using when we teach or when we play, and that's kinesthesia. And so being able to train our movement sense, music is movement. And it doesn't have to be perfect, you don't necessarily have to be like, some crazy person like me who's gone so deep at this point, right? But, if you just start kind of learning some basic information, I think it would go a long way for you and your students. You would start to be energized by your movement. They would start maybe feeling a little bit better as far as, because embouchure is huge, right? Embouchure is just so big. But there's a lot of misinformation about like the face. Like some people see like the lips and they're like, oh, those are my lips, right? But, that's not just your lips. There's like a whole muscle system around here. There's muscles that go this way. There's muscles that go that. There's muscles that are like facial that are like attaching to the neck, So it's like, if you can kind of be like, hey, so I know we're focusing on this part and we're trying to like form an embouchure and we're trying to get that buzz. We're trying to get whatever. But hey, did you know like your lips aren't just this, it's all of this? How long did that take? And are they going to sound better? 100%. And are they going to feel better? Yeah. And so it's that kind of stuff that it's like, it's not going to take time away because it's actually going to save you time later because they're going to sound better. They're not going to be sharp. They're not going to be flat.
It's that principle of investment. It's just
yes.
It's so true. And I just with the other part of that argument that I've heard that has been where with all the things that our educators have juggling is that oftentimes we confuse anatomical information or physiological or pedagogy, how it relates to that, as being too complex for young students, right? But I mean, as you just demonstrated, it's something that they can actually find a lot of enjoyment out of, right?
Yes.
Right?
Well, and I would say they want to learn this information. Like the brain, and I would say craves this information because it's cool first to kind of like learn about your body, I think. And I've found that with my own students. And then I also think because we have, more and more scientific research is supporting what Barbara Conable has claimed since like the early 90s, that, we have a representation of our body and our brain. So our brain wants to have an accurate representation, right? So it's sensing our body. We have all the senses going up to our brain. We have our nerves that are moving our body. But if we don't actually know where our arm joints are and where our arm attaches to our body, we're not going to move in a way that is going to be free from tension and things that could get in the way of the movement. And so our brain, I kind of call it, it's like a hack. It's a neuroscience hack. Is like, if you can learn these things, if you can bring it into your awareness and have that accurate representation of your body, it's night and day. Like your brain's like, "Ooh, yes." And it's almost instant how much better you play, how much better you move. I've experienced it, and as I've taught more, I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody who's ever taken an education class has known that the research supports that you can break down any subject small enough so that even a child can understand. It's that whole spiral curriculum thing, right? And
100%, yes.
My education professors, yes, I did indeed listen to you guys in class.
Despite you trying.
Right. So, well, Dr. Rader, this has honestly just been so much fun for me, and I've just really enjoyed every minute of it.
This has been just a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for letting me kind of talk about my soapbox a little bit.
Well, this is the place to do it, and I know it's gonna. I think this is probably one of the first. I'm trying to think. I've done quite a few interviews now. I think this is the first one where we've gotten super deep into the public education side of it.
Okay, well, good, because
so
that's what I'm
that.
trying to do is like get out there and say like we can do it here too, and we actually
Yes,
should,
absolutely.
like,
Absolutely.
because in my, 10 years in my state with my pension, 20 years left before retirement, at least, if not longer. I'm not that old even right now for 20 years from now, but like the number of students that I will have been able to reach over that 30-year career is like innumerable, right? And so
Right.
it's I think we forget how large of an influence public educators have, public music educators especially, in kind of who they're teaching, right? Because a lot of the research is focused on collegiate level and or high performing, even younger students, et cetera. But, if we can get to the educators and kind of get them excited about this information, get them the information they can use tomorrow to start having themselves and their students feel better, it's going to impact thousands upon thousands of people. So that's also something I'm passionate about too.
And if you really want to find something to be excited about, then how many of those students, because we will have spent the time to teach them about the correct technique and body mapping and stuff like that, we will have steered them clear of maybe roadblocks that would have ended their musical journey. Not even from an injury standpoint, but just from fulfillment or excitement, however you want to spin it. There may be a lot more musicians out there.
How many
now.
students quit music programs because they don't feel good?
Exactly.
I think that's a huge hole in research and something I'm curious of looking into in my future kind of endeavors. And I don't think it's a conversation we're having in the public sphere, public education sphere, or really anywhere. Who's quitting our classes and why, and then how much of it is something that hurts physically.
Yeah. Or that they are just misunderstanding their technique. And if they just had that knowledge, they would be able to,
update their body map.
Exactly. So if you've listened to my podcast, you kind of know how I like to end these things. It's my favorite part of the episodes, not because it's the end, just because I love what's talked about. You have somebody who comes up to you and they may be a string player, or not a string player, but they are going through injury and trying to figure out what to do next, or whether they're deciding to go a different path or just looking for any kind of advice. What would be your one thing you would tell them? The most important thing Dr. Rader would say.
Yes. Well, I would say the biggest thing is are you like thinking about, like, this is actually, I was not prepared for how hard this was going to be to answer, even though I've listened to your episodes. So it's like so interesting because like some of me is, it has to be your health first, right? So how that looks for different people is going to be different. Like so many people told me way back when my injury was still first the big deal. Oh, don't have surgery. Don't listen to what the surgeon's telling you to do. Like that there has to be another way, kind of thing. And so like it has to be like kind of health first, right? So for me, it was the surgery. For someone else, maybe it's not maybe it's not the surgery, right? But I just would say like it needs to be what is putting your health first. Because even now, as I'm, super into body mapping and things, and I've actually kind of started playing professionally again locally with some orchestras because of like what I've learned. I still like needed to go to physical therapy for a little bit, like so. And I remember kind of feeling kind of, oh, I'm this body mapping person and I still need to go to physical therapy. Well, it's because it's health first, So as much as I'm still, my brain knows this, whatever, like music is movement, I still need to do what I need to do to keep my body healthy and my, mental health healthy and all those kinds of things. So it would be, I think that would be my biggest piece of advice is the, like, it's the health first and making sure that who you're seeking and things is informing decisions that you're making. I think that would be my answer.
Yeah. Health first. That's probably gonna be the title of the episode or something.
Okay.
So it's just, or on our first Trust the Process hat. It'll be on the back or something. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
once we start rolling out the swag, but that's so important, And what I've learned is that health is a multifaceted thing. It's a holistic embodiment of our lives.
Health can be integrated with pedagogy, right? That's the whole body mapping and having injury prevention be from day one is it is about the health. It's not just I'm just learning how to play an instrument. No, it's health first, and making sure it's part of the process, because you're trusting the process, as your title of your show is.
Yep.
So
that's right. Well, and then my last question, if you could go back to that time of your life when your hands started going numb and things started going a different path, would you take it away or would you leave it there?
I knew you were going to ask that, and it's I can wholeheartedly say I don't regret anything that happened. As much as the knowledge I have now, I maybe could have prevented it then. The way I move now and the things that I know now, as I've updated my map and learned my sensory and integrated sensory information, there's some part of me that kind of can tell where the injury came from by how my movement patterns, right? But I don't regret the injury happening at all, because it's led me to find so much joy working with students every day. I get to I feel like my sphere of influence has grown more than it ever would have if I'd stayed on the path that I was on as a professional musician. And I still get to do essentially what I wanted to do then, which is share joy through making connections through music, and it's just different now, and the different isn't bad.
The different isn't bad. That's another cool. You got a lot of good one-liners in you, Dr. Rader.
Well, thank you.
Well, yeah, this has just been so much fun, and there's so many things I wish we could have talked about. Maybe we'll have you on again.
And I'd be happy to come on another time, or if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm on most social media platforms just under my name, and cool. My email address is just my name @gmail. So anyone can reach out if they have follow-up questions or anything like that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And everyone out there in podcast land, thanks for your time today as well, and for all you're doing and the hard work you're putting in, and for listening today. So until next time, just keep trusting the process. Thanks for listening today. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. To see a full bio for our guest today, see the show notes, or go to our website at trusttheprocesspodcast.com. Make sure you share this with a musician you care about who is going through injury, a music educator in your life, or anyone just trying to make it in life. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trusttheprocesspodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. Before we go, I just want to give a heartfelt thank you and shout out to my team: Daniel Baldwin, who is my audio engineer, Kevin West, who does all music and sound effects for the show, Peyton Womack, our website developer, and my sister, Dana Lovell, who created the logo and promotional materials. We wouldn't have the show without them. So tune in next time for another episode of Trust the Process.